to be around this. Okay, such a pleasure, though. For those that don't know, I am Melissa Rivers, the second vice president of the NAACP. And I personally picked this because I do have my daughter here to witness this. So this question is personal to me for you to answer. Oh, you can't hear me? Oh. Okay. Imagine in 20 years, a little girl is reading about your speakership. What is the top priority, and what would you like that little girl to take away as inspiration from what you have accomplished?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. The first question is, will the books be allowed to write about it? Serious question. Serious question. Or will there be another line erased? Unfortunately, it's a serious question, but in 20 years, in 2043, and when children learn about the change that occurred in Harrisburg and the history that was made, I want them to see evidence of the commitment that I talked about in my opening remarks. And so that happens through a few things. Policies being changed, but another one that I didn't highlight is just making sure that we have a tremendous decorum in the institution. I mean, we are the oldest continuous legislative bodies. There's some that were started earlier, but they stopped and had big pauses, but ours has been constant. But one thing that has occurred in the brief time that I've been there is you don't see the members holding each other in high regard. And we should hold each other in high regard. Even though our districts are distinct, even where I am in Delaware County and Philadelphia, you can't put me next to another rep and say, oh, your values are the same, or you vote the exact same way. But one of the goals that I have is to restore the respect to our institution when we're on the floor of the House. When I was a Senate staffer, I saw folks, give their disagreement, and then they go and sit in the dining hall and be side by side. They'd leave and go golf together. Republicans and Democrats. I joined the House in 2015, and it was similar. But now in 2023, the temperature's changed. So I hope that in addition to great policy wins, that people will also say, folks started to hold their head up a little higher and behave more professionally and treat each other with more respect. So hopefully, and I'll leave it up to you, daughter, to make sure that's in the books one day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Vio. Some of the key lessons that you learned from your early races.
Thank you for your question. So the chairman doesn't know this, but I'm going to have to school him on one fact tonight. I see one of my mentors in the audience, Judge Tamika Lane. She's a fact witness. I was not enthusiastic about running for state representative. Now, we're not going to call you up and swear you in, Your Honor. We're not going to put you under the oath, but she is a fact witness that I was not as enthusiastic as I became. And, over time, I found out through organizations that exist, emerge, represent, PA, and others, that I wasn't the only one. Apparently, there's a statistic that says it takes 7 asks on average for a woman to want to run for office. I know my former colleague here, Representative Boback, has told me about who recruited her, but I'll let that be a mystery novel for the next time I'm up here. Eye emojis. And Chairman Paczynski. But my senator encouraged me to run, and my response was no thanks, not interested. And it wasn't because as staff I thought public office was a bad thing. No, I had high regard for my senator. As chief counsel in the office, I saw what's not on PCN all the meetings, they're not on PCN, all the negotiations, they're not on Twitter, all the late night back and forth trying to get things done for constituents, that is not on social media. And I was able to be a part of it as staff, and I thought I was privileged, I was in the front seat, but I was in the back seat with my seatbelt on and a big legal pad. I said, I'm doing all the good work here. Why would I, inconvenience my life and run for office when, I'm doing good work as staff? So especially for the students here, I just want you to know there's great work that only happens with tremendous staff. So if you have a personality like mine and you're not looking for the spotlight, but somehow it finds you, there is great work to be done in your local legislative offices in Harrisburg. We need tremendous staff in order to accomplish these goals. But in terms of getting to the ultimate question, Amber, the advice I have is to really recognize what your why is, because even though other people are saying you'd be great, you need to tell yourself that. And if you don't tell yourself that, then you should not run, because you don't want to be a candidate barely asking people for votes. You have to be strong, and you have to be fear of being embarrassed for losing the race, or fear of being embarrassed, I'm going to lose in the next race. I started in a special election, but in 2016 I get kicked out. I said, well, with all I can do is 9 months, I'm going to go for it. If I have a special in August and it's successful, but I lose in the primary, well, I'm going to do everything I can for my community in the short abbreviated time. I want to say that I did not regret the time. So ask yourself what your why is, and make sure that you don't have any regrets leaving opportunities on the table just because it wasn't something you had originally envisioned yourself doing.
Hello, my name is Jolene Rodriguez. I am from the Hazleton area. I am Dominican. My question is, as you know, our state general assembly.
Representative Johanny Cepeda Freitas stepped up after being on the city council in Reading. We're certainly praying for the devastation that Reading has experienced this weekend. And she turned a page of history, and I'm going to make sure that that's in the history book too. I see our daughter texting somebody, I don't know. Make sure Johanny's in the history book, and whatever Journey goes on to do is in the history books. So it is a challenge to go into institutions where you have the same job as everyone else, but you may look different for most of the people. It's interesting. You have the same job, you have the same function, you have the same objective, you did the same type of campaign, perhaps maybe more or less, but you got the votes and you got there, but you look very different from everyone. So you can see that as a weakness, you can see it as a challenge, you can see it as an obstacle, you can let it be in your head and say, oh, you don't belong here, or just keep your head down and stay with the Black Caucus, the group that looks like you. Or you can do what I did, which was after a special election in the summer, I started with the committees I was assigned to, and I said, I'm going to learn these names. I'm going to find out who these men are. I'm going to get to know them. I'm going to not be in a shell, and I'm going to let them know. And I wasn't doing it to run for leader one day. I was doing it because I said, well, I work here too. And they're off talking. I want friends to talk to me on the back of the floor of the house. I want to hold conversations in court. I want to know what's going on in people's districts. I want to know what's going on in other areas of Pennsylvania and how our caucus is working together. So I gave myself a challenge because, and I started this in the Senate, because at the time my senator was the whip. I had to quickly learn all the senators, like in our caucus and across the aisle. Like I had to know who they were. I had to look at a sheet of people who did not look like me, 50 of them, mostly. Well, they did not all, but I'd say like 46, right? And I had to learn their names, and I had to make sure I learned their staff. So I had to tell the leader in the Senate where they were, the ones in our caucus, the 20-something, when they were not there, et cetera. So when I got to Harrisburg, they have these face sheets, and my neighbor, he's not here, but another representative, he'll tell you, he would start pointing, and I would say, That's Eddie Dave Pashinsky. He's like, how do you know? I said, that's Karen Bobek. She sells me my brooches. That's so-and-so and so-and-so. I mean, we had a budget stalemate, so it's not that we weren't focused, but we would do these name games, and he would point, and I would tell him, well, that's so-and-so. And I just spent time learning folks, introducing myself, not overselling, because people can see through the phoniness, but just taking the time and recognizing, I belong here just like everyone else. Just because at the time I started, there were only 9 black women, doesn't mean out of 203, I'm in the wrong place. I'm at the right workplace. Now we're up to 12 women of color. It takes a few years, but over time, things will be more representative, and we will see less firsts and more seconds, thirds, fourth, and fifth. And that's something that I work towards daily. Thank you for having me.
Hi, my name is Levi, and although I was wonderfully introduced by Alicia as one of the women leaders of the community, I am actually a non-binary person. I'm speaking to you as a member of the trans community. Pennsylvania is long overdue for an Equality Act that will enshrine equal rights and protection from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations for all people, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. What do you see is the best path forward for passing such legislation? Also, given the dramatic rise in legislation targeting queer people, especially trans and gender nonconforming people, in states like Florida and Tennessee, where do you feel Pennsylvania stands in this moment?
Thank you, Levi, for your question. And thank you for boldly being who you are. We appreciate your boldness and your bravery. Thank you. So the Fairness and Equality Act has been introduced every year for the last 12 years, well, I'll say every session, beginning of every session, and unfortunately, it's never come up for a vote. It has never come up for a vote. And for those who do not know, just in case you haven't read this lately, in Pennsylvania, it is very embarrassing to say right now, and we're working to change that, but right now, you can deny someone an apartment, a place to live. You can fire them based on who they love or how they show up in our world. And we know in 2023, that's just outrageous. We wouldn't want to have to experience anything like that ourselves. We wouldn't want our children to have to face anything like that ourselves. And so we know it's another ugly form of discrimination, hatred, and at times just ignorance, not knowing and understanding issues and respecting people and their individuality, why we see that that could have never moved in all these sessions. But this current session, that is something that's on our caucus's agenda, and we are going to, of course, work to get the votes necessary to get it out of our chamber. But then we'll have hard work to do across the Capitol to make sure that the Senate puts it on their agenda and gets it to the governor's desk. It's long overdue. It's unacceptable that any community in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania can be targeted and legally discriminated against. It's unacceptable. It's not what I know any person in this room stands for. So I'm glad that you asked that question. Chair Pashinsky and I are definitely working on that in Harrisburg. We return to session the end of April. So stay tuned, because it is our goal to work with our leader, Bradford, and make sure that that's a bill that's going to be on the agenda for this session. Glad to meet you too.
Speaker McClinton. It's so wonderful to be able to say that. My name is Krista Volchansky. I'm a proud graduate of the Department for Funding for K through 12 education, violates the state constitution, and severely disadvantages students of color and students in low-income districts. Education advocates estimate that $4.6 billion is needed to fully fund our schools. What are your plans for addressing this issue? Thank you.
for your question, Kristen. As I was saying briefly in the opening remarks, that is high up on our list of priorities because it should not, your zip code should not what type of public school you can access. And there's so many parents who have to navigate their lives in this complex system of public education in Pennsylvania around what type of supports their child can receive, what types of educational outcomes, of course, they're prioritizing for their children. And then there are certainly parents who are in affluent communities with very high property taxes whose school districts have everything that's necessary. They look as great as this college campus where we are right now this evening. And it's long overdue. It's long overdue because what we see is not just inequities in the educational outcomes. As a former public defender, I can tell you firsthand, this is one of the main factors that put children in the school to prison pipeline. It's one of the main factors that let children know there's no hope for your future because your school is dilapidated, it's falling down, it's giving you asbestos, you don't have the supports that are needed, your classrooms are overcrowded, so good luck with your future. At the same time as you're supposed to be learning how to read, how to write, how to advance yourself, and you're being tested on a regular basis. So when people ask me, even in my community, where unfortunately it's not unlike any other city in our nation or smaller cities in Pennsylvania, when they ask, well, what's the solution to gun violence? Public education is not the one and only solution, but it is on the list of factors. If we invest in public education, if we invest at the forefront of letting folks know you're important, you're significant, and your life actually has a future, you don't have to be in a mode of constant devastation of, well, there's not much to look forward to because I won't make it to 16 or to 18 or to 21, and certainly not to 30. Can you imagine if that is the reality in which you live because of things being so dire in your community? And when I say things, I mean your public education that you've had from K through. It's unacceptable. So we'll be working with the governor, we'll be working with the leaders of all the caucuses because we don't have the immediate cash on hand and revenue to say, okay, here's $5 billion, let's fix it. But we have to talk about, is it time to find new streams of revenue? Is it time to legalize cannabis? Is it time for us to find other ways to better fund and fairly fund our schools? Because it's unacceptable that our children are left on where the die falls. Roll it and see what type of school you end up in and whether or not you'll have a real shot and a real opportunity at success and advancement. And people think it's only as it relates to certain educations, like, oh, well, if you go to the school, you won't get to Harvard. But if you go to certain schools, you won't be able to pass the test with the laborers because you have to know math. You have to be skilled. It's not just where you're going to end up going to school. Like, there are opportunities that you're completely foreclosed from because you were not prepared for the moment.
So this time I have a question as well. And I didn't introduce myself. My name is Rose Daniels, third vice president of the NAACP. Thank you all for being here again. Mental health care in the BIPOC community is under a microscope as we learn of the disparities that exist in the current system. That disparity is prevalent right here in Luzerne County. The diverse demographics of the local population is not reflected in the resources made available, including services for substance abuse treatment and care from professionals working with patients in the field. How do you find balance to take care of your mental health, especially considering the pressure of your position? Can you share some words of encouragement with men and women of color who may be hesitant about taking steps to take care of their mental health?
Thank you, Rose. Thank you for that question. And thank you for bringing up a topic that in every community is taboo often. People do not like to talk about mental health, no matter what our color is, no matter what our background is, no matter where we live. We just like to kind of push it under the rug and, not have public dialogue. One of the benefits of, I'll say, dating myself, the youngest generation of leaders is there's no shame in so many things, and so many topics and so many issues. So you see people writing on social media saying, you know, it's not okay to be okay, and I had a good therapy visit today. We have to make sure that there's a pipeline for there to be more therapists, counselors, psychiatrists coming from communities of color especially. What does that look like? There can be incentives by way of scholarships to make sure there's ways that you're not saddled down in debt and able to serve. All of the professionals I know that serve say that they don't have any openings for new patients. Like they can't take new patients, and there are people who are struggling. And throughout the isolation that occurred at the start of this pandemic, and for some went on a long time, people are struggling in a lot of ways. So I will say, it's not a phrase, but we have to make sure that if you're not okay, it is okay, but you have to get the support. You cannot just fight battles on your own and think, I will be okay. And many times when you're much younger, everyone diminishes the challenges that you have. But I was reading an article in the New York Times a few months ago that said teenage girls right now have the hardest, most social pressures causing emotional distress on a regular basis, leading to, sadly, high suicide rates. So we have to look out not just for ourselves as adults, but with our children, with our young people, to make sure that they're in a great space, that they're not constantly comparing themselves to what they see on the internet and how they should look or how they should present themselves to the world. Because these things that sound trivial to some actually dictate your emotional feelings and your status and how you feel. For me, growing up years ago, it was, you know, what kind of sneakers do you have? Did you get that sweatsuit from Gap? But guess what? There was no internet, so no one else saw it. It was from Sears. No, it wasn't from Gap, but there was no internet, so no one else saw it outside of my high school, you know? I left and went home. Nobody else knew about the Sears sweatsuit my granny got. It was a bit of a secret, but now our children and youth are exposed to so much all the time, and it's constant. So, and then the second part, in terms of balance, it's very important that when we are serving as student leaders, as organizational leaders, grateful to serve my neighbors as their voice in Harrisburg, that I am also finding the time that's necessary to be a person, to be with my family, to see a movie in a theater, imagine that. To go to the hairdresser, wow. You'd be surprised how many times I've got to do twists right before events. It's no way to live. You shouldn't be doing all that and working hard, but guess what I did Friday for a long time? I won't tell you how many hours. I saw my hairdresser for the second time in a matter of 6 weeks. But I mean, that's a win for me. We usually have months in between. But I did that, and over the weekend, we planned it for a few weeks. I got to see my college roommates. We were together for hours last night with my one college roommate's parents, and we just laughed about the LaSalle days and played with everybody's babies and took weird selfies. I won't post. I don't want the judgment of the world. But, you know, got to recharge, and we didn't spend much time talking about politics. It was nice. That was nice. And then, quite frankly, the most difficult thing is recognizing when we are, in fact, you know, every burner, like you can't add another pot, those of us that cook, right? If every burner's going and you need to now, you know, have your potatoes boiled so you can get your yams ready, you're just going to have to wait until something else finishes. And I'm having to make decisions like that in my life. Like, I can't be anybody's sacrificial lamb, respectfully. I've got to cook what's on here, finish that meal, and then go on to the next. So we have to look ourselves in the mirror and recognize that we have to take breaks, we have to recharge, and if we need professional help, it's help available. And God forbid we're in a situation where we think we don't belong on this earth anymore. We don't want to read anything like that about anyone. So there's always support, from suicide lines to therapists to psychiatrists. Those of you who are students, I'm certain there's a counseling department here on campus, free of charge. So take advantage and do not be ashamed.
Thank you. Absolutely, thank you for answering these questions with such thought and it just shows that you are the strong leader that deserves to be the Speaker of our House in Pennsylvania. Once again, this Women's History Month is just absolutely, you guys feel this energy? It's overwhelming. Women are out here getting the work done. So I just have to, everybody just be in this space for a moment to just acknowledge this greatness that we are experiencing in our community. And I want you all to know that we are working very, very hard to build up our ranks of people who care about our community, people who have always had something to say and just needed the platform to get their ideas going and moving. And we want to inspire the next generation of leaders and movers and shakers. And that's exactly what we are doing here today. So give yourselves a round of applause as well. We are coming to the end. Well, we are at the end of this wonderful program, and shortly after, we will have some pictures with the speaker. Right here, right? Right here. So you guys line up and we'll take some pictures, about 5 minutes. So just good night, and thank you all for your attendance and participation. Thank you to all of you who have submitted questions for tonight's conversation. Your input is essential. Thank you to our local elected officials for being present with your community. Thank you for you guys, the community members, and the students. Shout out to the students. And thank you to our collaborating organizations. This is proof that there is power in numbers. Thank you to our speaker of the evening, Speaker Joanna McClinton, for sharing with us your experience and your insights, listening to the communities that you represent. You are truly a force of empowerment to all women. On behalf of us all, we would like to give you your flowers.
Thank you so very much.
So glad to see you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. So we'll have people come up this way. We're going to do pictures here. You get to meet the speaker, go through, and
I'm sorry, we have to go somewhere. We have to get back to Philly.
and there are refreshments outside for you.
You guys gotta be quick. You gotta move.